And so these virtual worlds, these virtual lands that we're talking about, they're actually not a metaverse. They're actually just virtual worlds that have blockchain capabilities of one virtual asset inside of one of these virtual spaces. It doesn't quite translate to another virtual space in the way that it should.
Eugene, thank you for coming on today. I appreciate you taking the time. I think in the real estate industry, there's a lot we can learn about Web3. I want to get an update on Metaverse, and since you're a specialist in these areas, I appreciate you taking the time.
It's my pleasure.
Why don't you give us a little bit of a background of where you're at and how
Sure.
you got to where you're at?
Yeah. So it's been a wild ride. So I'm a social media futurist and considered one of the foremost experts on this thing called the Metaverse, which is a byproduct of the third generation of the internet. Mm-hmm. And we're currently in the second generation of the internet currently. I'm best known for creating the show Glitched, which was the first in-virtual reality show to ever be ordered like a traditional TV show. It ran for 3 seasons. I also volunteer at the XRSI, which is a principal advisor to the Metaverse Standards Forum, as well as the United Nations. So there are people within the nonprofit that get invited to the White House and stuff like that. So I get to be part of conversations as far as how technology is evolving, how it's going to impact people, communities, and governments.
Sounds like a interesting job you've got there.
It is. It's a lot of people are like, I don't understand what you do, and you're like, you know, sometimes I don't understand it either.
Well, there's a lot to unpack here. I think let's start with the metaverse, then Web3 and real estate brokerage. It's going to change a lot of what we do, and I want to get into that. But let's start with an update on the metaverse. I know years ago we were selling homes and commercial buildings in the metaverse, and everybody was convinced that's where it's at. And you know, everybody in real estate is like, I don't see how this is going to work. But kind of give us.
So there's a huge, yeah. So there's actually a huge misconception. There has never been a house that's ever been sold in the metaverse because the metaverse does not exist yet.
Right.
And there's really 2 different versions of what this conversation is when we talk about real estate in virtual worlds. There is the application of ownership via blockchain, in which a house deed or contracts will be established, and it'll basically be kept forever on a digital ledger as a proof of ownership. And we've actually had projects like this for years, originally starting with a project called Bitcoin Colors. And that was the first like NFT or non-fungible token ownership project. And that was really to go, hey, how do we create a sense of digital ownership that represents realistic entities and properties and valuables in the real world? And so the other part of that really is, you know, what does virtual real estate look like, right? And I think that's actually more where you were heading towards.
Yeah, that's exactly. You know, because Snoop Dogg bought a house for $400,000 in Metaverse. You could buy the one next door for X amount.
Yeah,
that's where I was.
And so these virtual worlds, these virtual lands that we're talking about, they're actually not a metaverse. They're actually just virtual worlds that have blockchain capabilities.
Okay.
And I believe the platform you're referring to was either Summian Space or it was, God, what is the other one? I know the one you're talking about. It's just escaping me at the moment.
There were 3 that were huge, and you saw transactions happening there, and you could even brands were leasing space, like, and don't hold me to the brand, but like Gucci wanted to lease a space on this platform, and so you could see it, and that stuff started happening, and then it all kind of quickly went away.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember what the platform was. Let me look it up really quick. Sandbox.
Yep.
There was Sandbox in Decentraland.
Yeah.
Yeah, and again, these aren't metaverses, even though they like to say they are, because the concept of the metaverse is literally there's the open metaverse, which means there's only one, kind of like the same way that there's only one internet, right? And the final conceptualization of the metaverse would literally be like a browser, and you would be able to go from one virtual world to another virtual world in the same way that you are on the internet and you go from one website to another website on a switching servers in some place. So there's just a single browser that's basically allowing you to go from one place to another. Currently, all these places that like to claim they're quote unquote metaverses, they don't have that functionality. They don't have persistence. They don't have the ability to move virtual assets from one platform to another and have it translate identically. And so really when you get into the real estate world, when we talk about these virtual platforms, the ownership of one virtual asset inside of one of these virtual spaces, it doesn't quite translate to another virtual space in the way that it should, right?
Okay.
And so the best way to really look at it is, it's nothing more than a bunch of ones and zeros on the internet. That's all it is. It's much better to own real estate in the physical world.
I couldn't agree more. Basic, that's all I know is how to that, because when stuff was going on, I was just so confused. I'm like, I don't see how this is ever going to work. But so thank you for clarifying that. Now, where we're going with metaverse and Web3, how do you see it affecting commercial real estate brokerage or real estate brokerage as a whole?
Okay, so first, I think it would be best if we kind of define what Web3 actually is. And a lot of people are just going to say it's cryptocurrency or NFTs, right? But when we say Web3, what we're really referring to are third generation web technologies. That includes things like artificial intelligence, right?
Mhm.
And so there are a lot of different AI platforms right now that are coming online that are going to heavily impact how we say deal with real estate agents, how we market these properties for a client. How do we create virtual walkthrough tours, where before you had like Matterport, where you might go, hey, I'm going to go to a house. I'm going to take these Matterport cameras. I'm going to sit down. I'm going to scan every single room. And by the end, you're going to have a 3D walkthrough. But now we have Gaussian Explorer, where it's going to be, you can probably take just photos off your phone, create a 3D point cloud, and build a one-to-one scale of these homes without having to buy a really expensive camera. And you can just use your smartphone or your iPhone or your Android to basically create a better version of these experiences. Not just that, but with like image diffusion, we can take really crappy photos, because I gotta say, real estate agents are not tech savvy. I've dealt with
Do it.
so many, and usually when I try to have these sort of conversations, it's more like, dude, I just wanted to know how to fix my printer,
Yeah.
right? And
That's
so
right.
um there's going to be a ton of tools to basically take really moderate content in terms of sales, and you can be like, hey, artificial intelligence, I want you to take my image and I want you to make it look better. I want you to take photos of this empty house and I want you to stage it for me. And suddenly it'll spit out, fully fleshed out images of what this finished house could look once this new owner takes hold of it, versus the empty house that they're probably making content around, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah, and they're
furthermore,
doing it
it's
in commercial too. They're,
oh,
it's already, you're seeing some of it. They're it's like an industrial building. It just, it's incredible what they're doing. And AI's generated it. Perfect. You don't have to spend time leaving the office to go out and take the photo. You're going to get better quality, and it works well.
have you ever worked on like a commercial project that was like um all the CAD models were uploaded to like Unreal Engine, and suddenly you're picking different, colors for walls and floors and
Right.
patterns with like a click of a button, and you can just walk through it,
Hmm. Yeah.
one to one using like a VR headset.
Yeah.
Have you
Yeah.
tried that yet?
No, I've not tried it, but I know people that are testing it. And it's pretty amazing what they're doing.
I mean, it's gonna be the future, man. I think all commercial projects are probably gonna go that way, because I mean, it, it would be better to kind of figure out what things look like in like commercial projects
Hmm.
ahead of time, by having that like experience around you, versus going, hey, I know we just spent like $200,000 on this flooring, but I absolutely hate it, and I think the clients are going to hate it, so we need to rip it up and replace it all, right?
Right. Yeah.
So I mean, building 3D versions of these properties beforehand can just save a lot of time and effort. And talking to somebody like me who has the skills to build these sort of projects ahead of time, it's going to save a lot of headache in the future.
You
And I
know,
think that's where the real estate industry is going to be headed.
I think it's going to affect so many people in real estate. And I hadn't thought about this, but what about architects? I mean, they're probably, you're going to be able to put what you want into a building and upload the requirements from that are needed and put it into a system. And this thing's going to generate the building that you want. And it meets all the requirements.
Yeah.
And you're saving thousands of dollars in architectural renderings.
So there's a thing called human in the loop that I like to talk about when we talk about artificial intelligence.
Okay.
That even though like you're having an AI spit out these plans, these architecture plans that are going to fit all of these specifications, unless you're an actual architect, you're not going to know if those are correct or not,
Right.
right?
Yep.
Um, I saw a story where there was a lawyer who basically used Chat GPT to try to come up with all of his arguments, and he was pulling from cases that didn't exist.
Mm.
And the judge was like, hold on. And they went to go look at, the references that he submitted, and realized that they don't exist, and that's highly illegal, right?
Sure.
And so, you can be the best art, you can use artificial intelligence to, the best of your ability, but unless you have the skills necessary to do the actual job, you're not going to know if the information that artificial intelligence is going to give you, if it's going to be correct or not.
Yeah.
And so human involvement is always going to be needed, no matter how many jobs we think AI is going to replace.
Yeah. There's going to have to be oversight at all levels. Um, let's get into blockchain because I think that's something that I think is really going to affect commercial real estate. And tell me how you think it's going to affect commercial real estate.
I think there's going to be an easier sense of looking up records, right?
Mhm.
I think the way in which we buy and sell property is probably going to be a little bit more streamlined. I mean, if you're trying to sell a house, what do? You gotta sit down, you gotta get all the information on the house. Sometimes you have to go to like city hall, they gotta look through like back records. Old blueprints might be sitting in a box on a shelf way in the back in storage, and they gotta send some intern down to the negative fourth floor to go find it, right?
Right.
But if all these records are readily available for either private distribution or public distribution based on these blockchains, these ledgers, um, you'll basically type in whatever phrasing or commands that you need to get access to those files, and everything will be readily available, whether it was public or not, right? You just need the proper security codes. And that's the great thing about blockchain, is making sure that it is viable, it's on chain, and it is accessible only through the proper security measurements. And so I think at the end of the day, when we start using blockchain for buying and selling houses, it's just going to make the whole process easier. And maybe when we get to the point where it's seen as not just a physical element, but also a digital element, the time in which it takes to close might actually be sped up a little bit, which means real estate agents can get paid faster, which means people can move into their new house faster,
Yeah.
which means there's going to be the entire history of, hey, when was the last time this house was appraised? When was the last time there was a survey done on the property? You know, if you and your neighbor are fighting over the property line and where a fence should go, you know, I don't want to have to call a survey for it. I just want to go onto the blockchain, find the last time it was done, pull those records and find it, right?
Right. Are we going to be able to go back? I mean, are they going to be inputting data so we can go back and actually find when it was originally done?
I would hope so. I mean,
Okay.
there's going to be this like weird period of trying to get everything online, but that happens anytime you have a data beta a database of information that you're trying to pull and move into the modern age, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so, I mean, you're always going to have that disconnect at the very beginning, but once you get it and it's adopted, right? And like I said, these are third generation web technologies, and we're not even in the third generation yet. And so I think we're probably moved from Web 2 to Web 3 officially, like as a society, probably around like 2030. So we have, 6, 7, 8 years. But after that segmentation, um, these technologies will be massively adopted. And just by having it adopted, I mean, people be kind of forced to use these things.
Yep.
And after that weird learning curve is kind of over the hump, we'll be I think we'll be better off for it.
I do too. I mean, with what you're talking about there, we rely on title companies right now, right? And
Right.
so if all that information is going to be in the blockchain, I don't know how a title company is going to adjust. If all the documents are going to be on blockchain, escrow companies are probably, um, somebody be inputting it, I guess, but they could be on their way out as well.
I was recently talking to our mortgage company,
Mm-hmm.
and I was like, hey, what's your process like once you get your license? And they literally went, well, everything is done in AI now. Like we send automatic reminders to our MLOs, to our originators, to like when to send notices and disclosures. Like the whole process is automated, which means the job itself is way easier than it was, 20, 30 years ago. I mean, way less oversight because, 2008 happened, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Graham Leach Bliley. Um, but as we go on, like all these systems, all these new technologies are going to be put into place, and as long as there's the proper governmental oversight to make sure that they're being used properly,
Right.
that experts are being involved in the conversations of how they're being used, I mean, these jobs in itself are just going to get easier and easier and easier. And so it's really not so much about, hey, I'm going to spend all my time on marketing. It might be like, hey, I want you to build me an entire marketing plan for this house,
Mm-hmm.
and we're going to put it into place.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to, get onto my computer, put in my credentials, access, whatever governmental blockchain there is for owning houses. Going to show my credentials as a licensed real estate agent. Now I have access to all the public records, and let's talk about transferring some money so we can get the deed and the title and all these things that you need for buying and selling property to be moved over. And I think it's going to go from a 30-day process to probably a week.
Oh, I'm
Once
sure
we
it'll
once we
speed
get
up.
everything put into place.
Now here's the question though, Eugene,
Sure.
is we use in commercial, we use CoStar. A lot of the information you can't rely it on CoStar because the agents are inputting it. And a lot of times they're going too fast. They don't input it properly. They don't fill it out completely. Who's going to input this data into the blockchain, and this, so we can really rely on that information? Is it going to be the property owner? Who's going to input the data?
There's probably going to have to be some sort of governmental agency that does oversight for those
Okay.
sort of things. Furthermore, you're talking about the human error factor. The great
Yeah.
thing about blockchain is you do have a fact and checker and validation system put into place. So if you go ahead and update, property information on for a house, right? Every version of past owners, for addresses, for size, all of that information isn't going to go away. It doesn't get replaced. It just, the new segmentation or the new block gets added to the chain of information for a specific property, right?
Yep.
And so even if there is human error, I mean, you could easily go back and be like, oh, the old stuff didn't get replaced, it was just added. There's an error. We know there's an error because it doesn't match what the past records show for it, right? And if it doesn't match, there's going to be an issue, and then it's not going to be added as a finished block into it because we have those validations put in place.
Okay, so we can go in and edit it and make
Yeah.
changes.
I mean,
One
and
thing
and
with
yeah, any change that happens
Mhm.
will update the blockchain, right?
Okay.
But if the information is incorrect and it's clearly obvious, and we have those fact checking validations from two separate places usually,
Mhm.
and if both of these blocks say that they're correct and the new block that's being added says that it's incorrect, it's not going to be added unless there's a justification of why it's being added.
Okay. The I mean, I think it can really speed the process up fast, because if you want to buy a property, you can go in and see all the data, title, and then, everything that needs to be transferred. If there's a lease on the property, it's going to be in there. How long the lease is, how much they're paying. It's it's really going to expedite things and make things move a heck of a lot faster in commercial real estate. Well, in residential too.
Have you
So
guys started using blockchain in your?
no,
Why not? What's
not
what's
yet.
the holdup? What's keeping you from adopting it?
Well, I can tell you, in commercial real estate, I think we're just learning how to use AI properly right now. A lot of companies are using it for back end. They're using it for what's going on in the office. Transaction coordinators are using it. A lot of the accounting, bookkeeping is being done. A lot of companies are trying to figure out, and our company is one. We're focused more on the front end, how to bring in more business for our agents. So that's a revenue generator. We're fortunate that we're small enough we can do this, right? So we're focused on the front end first. Back end, there's some amazing tools that are coming out that are really going to simplify it for us. But that's my excuse, Eugene. One thing at a time. We got to get AI going first, man. But I'm
It's
seeing how
it's
it can efficiencies.
it sounds like you're actually not working on AI. It sounds like you're working on automation, which is a little bit different, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
how
and
do
it's
how do we cut cut tasks so we can
right,
um basically reclaim our time so we can put it
right.
into other things that are going to generate us revenue.
Yeah, well, we have they call it AI anyway. It's on our website under Commercial Brokers International. And it's a way that you can go in and and it's multifamily focused right now. They'll expand once they have all the bugs worked out for those other asset classes being retail, office, industrial. But they've got multifamily figured out. So you can go in and it's kind of like Zestimates, only a lot more accurate. You can tell exactly how much your multifamily property is worth. It scrapes all this information from the surrounding area, because commercial real estate, or actually real estate, is such a local business that
Mhm.
you want to scrape the local data, and then it puts a price on there, price per square foot, price per door, and gives you a good value for the property. It seems to be pretty right on. So that's one we're working on. But yes, the rest of it is pretty much just about being more efficient in the back end as well.
What comparable method are you guys using for that?
I did not build it. I haven't a clue. It's somebody that that
Cost
they
validation.
said, okay, we'll try it for like 6 months and see how it goes.
I mean, that's the sort of conversation you should probably be asking, right? I mean,
Mm.
is it a cost analysis? Is it a sale
Oh yeah,
analysis?
yeah.
Is it
No,
just an estimation
the CEO
analysis?
of our company did all that. He took like 3 or 4 meetings with them, and then he does all the analysis for the properties that we invest in, and of course sell. And he teaches it to the new agent. So he's the one that knows all that stuff. I was not in those meetings, but um, there was a guy that I was talking to, and he said, "I'm going to start a brokerage, and it's going to be all AI driven." And I said, walk me through that, because brokerage is a very hands-on business, right? And
Mhm.
he just thought he'd be all these AI tools. He'd have somebody cold calling. He'd have all these AI bots on his site working. And I thought, you know what? I don't. This has been like 5 months ago, and I just looked recently, and he hasn't done anything yet. But it's going to be hard to replace a salesperson. But it is going to make them a lot more efficient.
It it is, and also I think it isn't. There are certain tools that basically act as like sales agent chatbots that you can have on your website, right?
Yep. Yep.
But in terms of calling, I mean, I've been seeing demos that have come out of like Google 4 or 5 years ago that
Mhm.
still aren't publicly released.
Right.
I just had somebody call me to basically build them an automated like dialing system to basically use artificial intelligence to basically have those conversations to sell and close people. And there's a reason why the systems that are currently available for that cost like 25 grand to get in,
Yeah.
while everybody else wants to spend like 150 bucks a month for a system like that, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
It's hard. I've listened to a few of them, and they're getting a lot better, but it seems like every 6 months they reach back out, and it is a little bit better, but it's still it's not what it's not there yet.
I think people have their jobs for a
Yeah.
little bit longer.
I
Um,
agree.
Look, there's always going to be like, jobs in whatever field that get replaced by artificial intelligence.
Mhm.
But as long as you're aware of the capabilities of what AI can actually do, and as long as humans can continue to do that task better, more
Yeah.
efficiently, you don't want like I had somebody call me up. It was a aquatics robotics company recently, and they wanted a sales agent for their website. And I had to provide them with like 200 pages of, facts and everything for the AI to pull information from. And they didn't like that I was doing that because they wanted the AI to basically act as like chat GPT, right?
Mm.
Where you might give it a prompt. And I was like, well, how much are you guys looking to spend? He was like, 800 bucks. I want to spend 800 bucks on this thing. And I'm like, you want an AI chatbot for $800 that matches something that spent $100 billion to develop?
Yeah.
Like there's a strong disconnect here. I mean,
Yeah.
we have access to like the best technology in the world as like consumers, but to create it for yourself, I mean, that's you probably don't have deep enough pockets for that.
Right. Yeah, and I'm constantly, it's almost every day the emails are coming in. Hey, let's try our AI. So there's a lot of companies out there doing it. But I just think you need the good stuff. You get, I mean, I see some of the bots that come in, and I obviously get a little nosy and test them, and they're horrible. And that bad experience makes me never want to use that company again.
Well, yeah. 95% of these like AI companies that reach out to you,
Yeah.
who are like, let's put a sales agent on your website.
Yeah.
Let's, create a cold calling agent. Let's, figure out how to basically be a personal assistant. 95% of those are going to be like a Claude 3 or a ChatGPT 4 wrapper with
Mhm.
its own GUI. That's all it is. And those systems were not trained for specifically doing those jobs.
Right.
They received a prompt to basically act in a certain way, and it's doing its best to compensate and fight with all of its other programming to be able to perform that job efficiently. And so unless you're training your own LLM, it's not going to be the same. It's
Right.
not going to be as smart as a human who's been doing it for 10 years, because they'll be able to understand the nuance of the position, whereas the AI just isn't there. I mean, what we currently have is considered something called narrow AI. And by the way, AI in itself has been around since the 1950s. It started originally as some interns over at the College of Dartmouth going, how do we get computers and machines to think like humans, to create and do all this stuff? And 60, 70 years later, this is only as far as we've gotten, right? Which doesn't seem very far for 70 years.
Right. It seems
And
new.
and so what we currently have is called narrow AI, and it's like a small section in the human brain doing the same task over and over and over. Yeah, it's going to get really, really good at that task, but it's not going to have the same understanding and moldability that a human brain does. I mean, if it was an entire human brain, it would actually be something called AGI. And right now it's completely hypothetical.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Eugene, let's go into smart contracts. I was talking
sure.
to a guy the other day, or actually, this is several months ago, and he has what he says is an AI that you can put a commercial lease in. You have all the regulations for the area that you're in. You could tell it what exactly you want for this property. It'll spit it out. You can take a 70-page lease. In 30 seconds, you're going to have a brand new lease all drawn up. Any way that are we that far along?
Yeah, I mean, at that point, it's literally just grabbing individual blocks that have already been pre-rendered that are sitting inside of the large language model, right?
Okay.
And so it's going, hey, what are the things we need for that contract, for that smart contract? What is the coding language? Is it Rust? Is it verbatim? What are we going to be using? Okay, so great. Inside of that contract, what does it need? It needs input devices. It needs an address. It needs a loan amount. It needs a social security number. It needs, credit history. It needs all these things. And it'll go, all right, I've seen, 100,000 different versions of this. What is it most likely going to need? It's going to spin it up with the input of what exactly the request is. And it'll go, hey, this is what I think you need. And then at that point, it still might be wrong. It might be 100% correct, but it might be wrong. And so it's not best to take, smart contracts that have just like come out of one of these systems.
Sure.
Unless it's, specifically built to do that model, right?
Right.
And yeah, and so I think it could be correct. I mean, I would have to sit down, take a look at it, and see how much. Like, so did you try it in yourself? Did you
No,
sit
no, no.
down?
He was just telling me about it, and he goes, "Yeah, I took a 70-page lease." He goes, "Now I've been doing brokerage in my market for years." He goes, "I have all the inputs that I put in. I know what I want this lease to say when I'm done. I input it, boom, it comes out in a few seconds." He goes, "Obviously, I have to go over it again, but he goes just the one time, and he goes, I'm done." He goes, "It's I see the changes that I want, and make sure that they're there." And he goes, "I've been doing it now for like 6 months. It's been working well."
Right. I think he probably had a wonderful prompt that he put
Probably.
in, right?
Yeah.
And
He's a
as
tech
long as you
guy,
have
so
enough data going into the system beforehand,
yeah.
I mean, I've built probably 1,000 contracts for design work or for projects and stuff. And honestly, after the first like 150, they're all kind of the same. Like I know what to add now, and it's just pretty much, grab a template, fill it out, change what I need, and away we go, right?
Yeah.
And I have a feeling it's probably the exact same way.
Yeah. The only thing is, I asked him, I said, so, but a lot of these property owners have custom forms. He goes, we're working on that, but the generic forms that they get through AIR or whatever they're doing, they have it all in place. And he says it saves us a ton of time. But now all these smart contracts, they will be saved on the blockchain as well.
Well, I mean, that's kind of what it is.
Yeah.
So a smart contract and a leasing contract, they're completely different.
Right.
Like a leasing contract isn't a smart contract. When we talk about smart contracts, what we're really talking about is the formation of a blockchain and how it executes within its structures and rules for what the output is going to be. And usually we use smart contracts to create like an NFT series of some kind.
Okay.
Now, the contract that we're talking about, which would be like a lease or a deed, that in itself would be the NFT or the non-fungible token.
Gotcha.
The piece of code and the piece of information that is literally spit out to be executed upon within the blockchain, where it's probably not going to change that much. And if it does change, it was because certain elements were actually programmed in via the smart contract.
Gotcha.
Think of the smart contract like a piece of software, right?
Yep.
You're gonna give it rules. You're gonna give it information that it need, and the thing once it runs is going to be the executable. Usually, that's you know you're rendering a movie, or you're making an image, or you're making a document or a PFD, and a non-fungible token could be any one of those things, any one of those modalities, but it's kept track on the blockchain, right?
Gotcha.
The smart contract is just the rules and regulations that you put in place, telling it how to act.
Well, I did not know that. What do you think are going to be the biggest challenges as you said we've got 6 or 7 more years. What do you think are the biggest challenges we're going to run across in this transition phase?
Um, I think it's probably going to be the learning curve,
Right.
right? Like I said, years ago, I worked at a YouTube consulting agency called Press Play. And it was actually inside of a Keller Williams. The guy who owned the agency was a Keller Williams agent.
Right.
And so for a year and a half, I had this office in the back, and I was building videos and websites and, documents and, these 360 video experiences. And a lot of my clients ended up being real estate agents. And the questions I got from these agents would just blow your mind, because they're not tech savvy people. They're real estate agents tend to be people. Like their whole thing is, am I a great communicator, and can this communication lead to a sale, right? And people who are tech savvy, believe it or not, don't always have the best personalities for doing like customer service, right? And it just kind of goes with the industry. And I'm not saying like there can't be a very charismatic programmer out there.
Sure.
It's just you're more likely to find somebody who isn't as charismatic in that role, right?
Gotcha.
And so we have to understand that if we are taking an entire industry of people who are supposed to be emotionally intelligent, and they're adopting things that are technology centric, where emotion isn't part of the equation, there might be a hard learning curve or a bit of a disconnect. And that's okay. That just means they need somebody in their life who does speak, nerd or geek or tech, to come and put those systems into place so they can focus on doing what they do best, and just create the system that works on multiple levels, right? You build the bridge from one aspect to the other. That's all it is.
Yeah, and I think if you take the fear aspect out of it, because when I first started using ChatGPT and Gemini, I was like, oh God, this is, but and then I found it to be very interesting, and I thought, okay, this is a lot easier than I was expecting. And I think we've removed that fear. And I think, where we're going to is it's going to make us a lot more efficient. You're going to be able to make more money because you're going to be spending less time on paperwork, on your marketing, because on the marketing, the way it can help is absolutely amazing. You can figure out what you need to say to your audience. You can build your ideal clients and figure out how to target to them, and it works. It works wonders. And so I'm really excited about where we're going. And now you wrote a children's book. I want to talk briefly about that. Tell us about your children's book.
I did.
Why you
I
wrote a
I wrote a kid's book called All the Things You Can Do in the Metaverse.
Right.
So my wife, English isn't her first language. It's actually her third language.
Oh God. I
Yeah,
struggle
and
with
I
this
didn't speak Mandarin or Cantonese.
one. Mm-hmm.
But we fell in love, and now we have a baby of our own, baby Lucas. He's 6 months old. But when I showed up into the family, um, I have a niece and nephew named Jaden and Selena,
Mm-hmm.
and English. Well, they're bilingual, so, or trilingual, right? English, Cantonese, Mandarin, and when I showed up, their dad had just passed away,
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately. Like their
Sorry to hear
dad
that.
died like a few months prior. And so here's this guy who's about their dad's age, who's coming in, who's taking care of them, who's watching them, who's helping them, grow up. And so they didn't know, what to quite make of me. So the family taught them to call me best friend,
Mm.
because I wasn't married in the family yet. And I was like, if I'm going to be a part of these kids' lives, I kind of want them to understand the world that they're going to be growing up into, the world that I'm an expert in. And so, right around Christmas, I published a children's book called All the Things You Can Do in the Metaverse. And Jaden and Selena are literally the main characters in the book.
That's awesome.
And it talks about them conversing with an artificial intelligence. It talks about putting on VR headsets and going into the metaverse. It talks about what an NFT and blockchain and cryptocurrency is. They go to a concert, they play games. It's a fun experience. And then by the end of the book, they take off these VR headsets. And the AI that they were talking to the whole time just turned out to be their best friend, Uncle Gene. It's a
Works
cute
itself
story.
in.
Yeah.
That's amazing. If you
Yeah,
send me a link to that, Eugene, I'm going
I
to
will.
put it in the bottom of the video here. Okay.
Okay.
So, what's next for you?
That is a great question. I recently am in conversations to start a new company called Spectacle.
Okay.
It's going to be me and Drew O'Mara. Drew O'Mara is the gentleman who created the audio visualization application that's used in Winamp, iTunes, and Windows Media Player.
Okay.
So anytime that play like a music file and you get those like cool visualizations, that's actually a product called GeForce, which he invented about 25 years ago. And so him and I are having a conversation right now about starting a new company, and developing the next generation of audio visual for the metaverse and what that might actually look like in the next coming years.
Very cool. Well, I wish you the
Yeah.
best of luck with that. Now, how do we get hold of you if we have questions?
So if you want to get a hold of me, you can get a hold of me on Twitter at Capon Design, Capon. I have a biweekly newsletter called High Tech Influencer. And then, you can just email me at eugene@caponinvestments.com.
Very good. Thank you very much, Eugene. I appreciate you taking the time. as you can see, I don't know a ton about this, so I find it to be very interesting. But you know, it is the future of real estate. Actually, it's the future of a lot of businesses. So I
You
appreciate
know,
you taking the time.
when you started your journey into real estate, I bet, the concept and the information that you had to learn seemed overwhelming as well, right?
Yeah, it sure did.
Yeah.
Although, you know, we were using microfiche and there was no internet then, but still, that microfiche thing, that was intimidating the first time. So,
Yeah, but
so yeah, it
over
is.
over time you learned it, you
Oh
adopted
yeah,
it,
yeah.
you became familiar with it, and now you're the expert hosting your own podcast and inviting experts in other fields on to have conversations about subject matter that might be new to you. And that's amazing. And as you continue on this path, you're going to learn more about these industries that are going to intersect, and
Oh yeah.
eventually you'll become an expert on that as well.
Well, I'm going to keep you coming back. So yeah, you're my go-to source in this stuff. Thank you very much, Eugene. I appreciate you taking the time.
Always a pleasure, Joe.
You bet. For those of you watching, if you could, please give us a like. And if you haven't done so, make sure you subscribe.